Terry Redknapp here. You're listening to a proper podcast. It's the Alan Hudson Podcast. It's proper football, proper talk.
Hello again. Back to the grindstone at the Alan Hudson Podcast. Thanks for joining us. For all those subscribers out there, thanks for tuning in to every show that we do. If you're a non-subscriber and you like what we do, it'd be great if you would subscribe. Just go to the YouTube channel, Alan Hudson Podcast, click on the subscribe button, and that's all you need to do, and that would be great. Today we've got, an extraordinary guest, I would suggest. This fella had a great career at 5 different clubs. He started off at Chelsea as a striker. Then you've heard enough, quite enough from me. Let's just introduce him. It is, of course, Kenny Swain. Hello, Kenny.
Morning, Alan, and morning, Tony. How are you both?
We're good, mate. We're good. It's great to have you on, mate. It's I've never Wikipedia'd anybody like I've Wikipedia'd you. I don't do any homework or nothing. That's Tony's job. But I was fascinated when I'm reading all your stuff, what you've done, because when I left, you come into the Chelsea team, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating from then on that all your success kind of come when I was in America.
Yeah.
I moved to Seattle, and when I came back, it was a transition in football, really. The game has changed, but to play in the positions you played, and Tony and I were just talking about, it's a wonder that nobody at Chelsea saw you as that kind of player, because Chelsea had the likes of Eddie McCready, yeah. Ken Shillito got badly injured, and they kind of would Doherty have seen that in you? Because how did it come about, Ken?
Well, the opportunity, if that's the right word, came about when a lad called John Gidman, who was a
great friend of mine.
Yeah, it was a bloody good. He was a cavalier type fullback. He picked it up. He'd run for fun. He had lungs. He had legs, and he had a bit of charisma as well. And he was obviously a big player at Aston Villa at the time, with the likes of Andy Gray, Brian Little. He had some fantastic players. This is like 5 years into my Chelsea career.
Yeah,
and I'd watch him as all players do, ex-players. They're watching football, they're watching other players all the time, and you take a liking to some players, and others you think, oh, bloody hell, he can't play for toffee, this fella. But with with Villa and going to Villa, it was purely John Gidman was leaving the club. He was going to, I think it was Everton actually, and Ron Saunders, the manager, then said, I want you to play fullback on Saturday. Have you played there before? And I said, well, I played out wide. I said, but, I don't know about the defending bit. And he said, well, I said, I think you've got qualities. He said, so we'll take a look at it. It was obviously just going to be a temporary thing, but it went on for about half a dozen games. And at the end of that, he said, now, what do you think? Do you fancy it? Number 2 role? Or do you want to stay up front and compete with Brian Little, who was injured at the time, actually. Brian Little and John Deere, and this before Peter With came. And I just said, I'll give it a go. So that was it. I was in a fullback, and I think playing out wide as I did for Chelsea most of the time probably helped, So, and I think with players anyway, I think they understand areas of the field more than, like you were a proper midfield player. You could receive it from the back. You could play forward. You can get forward. You can support the attacks. And you're playing in the middle of the park where it's Clapham Junction in the middle of the park. But for someone like me who's limited in the brain, all I could see was lush green pastures ahead of me on the wings. And I think that's possibly how it developed. And then obviously the most important part of the job was the defense.
I'm listening. I've got to hear every word. I got to knock on my door. It's probably Dom Revy.
I've seen some sights in my time, Tony.
I've told him a million times about those legs.
Yeah, so staying on your feet and dealing with the 1v1s was the biggest thing, and then obviously, you know, your position back in relation to everybody else. So it was a pretty easy transition for me, really.
But it's interesting. I mean,
It wasn't Rebby.
oh, are you there or are you not there?
So it wasn't Rebby. I want Don to come back to haunt me. But on what you just said is fascinating. It fascinates me because Tony and I were talking and of how you can. It's all about management, really. Ron Saunders must have been a good judge.
Well, yeah, I think he you know, if you look at his record, not just at Villa, he had a fantastic record at Villa, but he was at Man City before that, and I think he was at Norwich as well. So he had a little bit of success at those clubs. So he was for me like a top manager, and that's
He changed your life.
yeah. Basically,
you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm one of the most hated players that ever played at Chelsea, both with the fans and everything. And I've come to. I'm 73 years of age, and it doesn't bother me a bit because you know, it's water off a duck's back with me. They don't like what I say. They don't like what I say, but they've never been in my position and got treated by Chelsea like that. But I find it's very strange that Chelsea can let. If I was a director of a football club and you'd done what you did, gone to Villa and won the European Cup, I'd be questioning my manager. Why didn't you see this? You know.
Well, I think it's not just one manager. It would have been a case of a few managers because I played under Dave.
Yeah.
Dave Stephen, who was without doubt one of the best coaches in the country. There was no doubt about that. Eddie Mack.
Yeah.
Who else was there then? Eddie Mack. Ken Shellito.
Ken, yeah.
Jeff Hurst.
Who?
Did you?
Jeff came just after I left, I think, Jeff. But I had 3 or 4 managers there in a space of, 3 or 4 years, 5 years. So you could say that, they all didn't see it. Maybe I didn't see it. But
yeah. It's like, well, that's even more the reason in a situation like when you're in at Chelsea, you was there when it was turmoil, really. It was from when it went from Dave to Eddie, it was just chaos, and getting things. What Eddie done was a miracle, really. I thought, bringing the team back up. He's a great friend of mine. I love him to death. But then on, I suppose what I'm trying to get at, if you're a manager and you're in trouble, you got to have a look in your team and your players and say, I wonder what I can do here to change things around and maybe play Kenny. You're used to playing on the right. You've gone to Villa and you proved, nobody wins. I mean, you were a better copy than Forest when they won it for me. Your team was a better team individually. Would you say that?
No, I wouldn't. And having played for both clubs and, shared the field, with players who've won the European Cup at Forest.
Yeah.
As I say, I think first and foremost, we're all football lunatics, aren't we? But,
we are. We are. But before you go any further, you don't want to say the wrong thing. I've got yourself. You're a good, terrific footballer who went right back, and you could show a lot more of your talent when from a deeper position. I've got Dennis Moore, Gary Shaw, Tony Morley, and Gordon Cowans. Now, for me, that's 5 or 6 players. That Forest. I know Forest built a team around Peter Shilton not to let goals in, and they got the 2 big boys at the back. Kenny Burns was a great player for me in that team, and John Robertson. I really couldn't, comment any further. They bought Trevor Francis, but I'm talking about their European Cup winning team, and I've met John McGovern, nice lad, and everything else. But that Villa team to me had more talent.
Well,
if you put the 2 teams on paper, one would you choose to go furthest?
At that particular time, I probably said Forest because because they've done it once, and to do it twice is an absolutely unbelievable achievement. I mean, they talk about Leicester, winning the Premier League a few years ago, but I think it was the tail end of my time at Chelsea, and I think we went up together actually. Forest and Chelsea got promoted. I think we were in the same group, teams that went up and played in what was then the first division. They've come out of the second division, gone into the first, won that division, then gone into the European Cup the following year, won it, then defended it again and won it again. That is the miracle.
Well, that was, I mean, he nearly did that at Derby, didn't he?
Well, that's the other thing. It wasn't like, out of the blue. He came so close. Was it the semi-final against Juventus?
Yeah. They said the referee went bent on him.
Yeah, Milan. Juventus.
But do you live closer to the Forest ground or to the? No, but it's, we're talking about. I suppose we're talking about something here which is down to completely and utterly down to the manager. Yeah. Yeah. So we're on a different thing.
Yeah, I think I was dead lucky working for Ron Saunders for 4.5, 5 years nearly, and then to have moved on to Forest. God, the impact he had, not just on me, but I could see the impact he had on the dressing room.
Absolutely.
The board of directors, the police force, the supporters.
Absolutely.
Referees, referees loved him because he didn't stand any, nonsense, any shenanigans from players. In fact, I remember being on the bench once, and one of our players bashed into somebody, went down injured, and he was rolling about injured, and the physio was just about to get up, and he grabbed him straight away, and he said, "I'll tell you when you go." Get up! He said. This is to his own players.
Well, there's an old story about Bill Shankly, at Liverpool, and they brought the injured player in at half time. He hobbled off, and he just the physio. They weren't physios then; they were trainers, weren't they?
Yeah.
And he went to take his boot off. He said, "Don't take it off. Don't take it off. You'll never get it back on." One of them. So there was them kind of managers, weren't there? And they they stand up as gods, and Clough was that. There's no other. I wouldn't think no other manager in the history of the game could have done what he'd done at Derby and Forest.
Yeah.
There was no. I mean, it was just unheard of.
Yeah.
And I played against Derby in my first season when Dave Mackay actually came. And if the film's anything to go by, and Peter Taylor calls him up and he says, "I've got just a man for you, Dave Mackay." He said, "He's older than me." That's what Clough said. He's older than me. So that was set the scene for Dave to go and do what he'd done, But Clough is, I mean, a great experience for you. I mean, to play under him for that time.
Oh, he had an enormous impact on your life as well. He had an enormous impact on my life.
Yeah.
Certainly brought me out of my shell a little bit. I felt more confident, more assured in everything I did, on the field, off the field. He was an amazing sort of real charismatic guy.
Well, Ken, this is what I try to explain to people which they don't understand between coaches and management and the importance of management. My son's a manager. He managed the United States in the World Cup, and he should have, he could have done a little bit more, but it was still fantastic for the family. We were so proud of him. But I said, look, mate, if you want to stay a coach all your life, you'll just be coaching.
Mm-hmm.
You won't have no impact on people's lives. If you go into management, they're running people's lives.
Yep.
And that was what exactly what you said. I mean, that was Clough's forte. Waddington at Stoke was exactly the same as Clough, but in a much gentler way. He didn't like the limelight, but he would sort any problem out. If you knock on his door, he would sort it out.
I think Laurie McMenemy was another one. I know you had Tony Waddington at Stoke, but from what I can gather, Malcolm Allison was like that. There was lots of managers around then who were.
I'm not so sure Malcolm. Malcolm was more take you down to Playboy and have a glass of champagne. It wasn't all champagne and roses, and that's why he didn't last the course, really. And I used to go on well with Malcolm. Raise a glass for him anytime. But anyway, we'll move on. In your time, I suppose. You've done great. You've gone on to coach the England under 16s, 17s. What did you learn from your managers that you put across to? Well, what one did you learn most?
Yeah, I think I probably learnt more from Dario Gradi and Dick Bate, who was at the FA. Dick sadly passed away, I think 3, 4, 5 years ago now. It was a big influence on me in coaching. And at the end of my playing days, I did have a go at management in Wigan and Grimsby, but, didn't make a bloody good job of it. And after 3 or 4 years...
You will take the good jobs, Ken,
But after 3 or 4 years, I thought, I'm better off doing something that, one, I enjoy, and two, I'm not bad at, which was like, spotting a player, coaching players. And so I got straight back into the coaching circuit with the PFA, funnily enough. Jimmy Armfield, Jimmy employed me as one of their coaches, their regional coach. And I had 1 year, but in that time, I'd been doing work at the national school. Do you remember that one at Lilleshall? Yeah. So for 2 or 3 years, I was doing part-time stuff there. And then I got the job with the PFA. But with the contacts I had, I think I got an opportunity then at the FA to be a regional coach for them, which I bit the hand off straight away because I knew this was the course that I wanted to follow. Yeah. Basically, I've been in that for 25 plus years now, and still am. Still love doing what I'm doing. Right. Albeit it's tailing off a little bit, but nevertheless, I love getting out of bed in the morning and know what I'm going to do.
That's great. I mean, I've got to get out a copy of your book, by the way, before we get to the end of the show, because I really want to read it. I've made a note. It's fascinating. Your fascinating stories, and I wish I knew you better at Chelsea. I wish I'd have stayed longer and you'd have got inside when I was there.
Do you know what? Looking back there, Alan, when I was a kid, up in Liverpool at school, and with Evertonians, all my mates were Evertonians. There were more
Alan Ball. You don't like Alan Ball?
Oh, well, he was my hero.
Boy. Well, you didn't speak to him for 15 years?
Well, I know, yeah, but I tell you what, we made up for it. Because I couldn't do that. Yeah, got it. Yeah, I've got to move this. Can you see that? That's the that was the program. Or the front. Yeah. The World Cup. And you can't quite see it, but up here, just there, and you can just about see it.
Yeah.
I got Bally to this was after, we'd made up and everything afterwards. All
right, listen, we don't want to hear about you making up. What'd you fall out about?
Well, he was a fantastic player, absolutely. And I remember playing. This is when you were at Chelsea. I was in the reserves at the time, and one of my first games, I think I played about 6 games at the end of the 74 season. By then, I think you'd gone. Is that right?
Yeah.
You'd just gone by then. And we played Arsenal, and of course, I'm playing football. Across the way there in a red shirt is Alan Ball, and I felt so like overawed, if you like. And I made a beeline for him. I made a beeline for him at the end of the game just to shake his hand, and I was quivering with excitement. Oh, really? And then to go towards the end of my career, then to go down to Portsmouth and have Bally sign me, I thought, bloody hell, and it was just great fun for 3 years down at Portsmouth. But what a player he was.
Oh, the best, absolute best. I was very lucky that when I wanted to prove myself for England, I had him in the team with me otherwise. Yeah. But step backwards, why was Dario the most influential coach?
He was innovative, if that's the right word. He come out with new ideas, new things. I think he was fortunate. Now, whatever the recruitment thing was at Chelsea at that time, Chelsea, without a shadow of a doubt, and looking back now, I can see why. I can't see why, but I can see how.
Yeah,
they had the best young talent in London playing for Chelsea, and he was at the forefront of all of that, Dario. And when you got into the first team, you were well prepared, for what Dave was expecting and for what Eddie McCready was expecting. They went in there. Now, I know we said before about, the club went AWOL a little bit financially, but those kids, Ray Wilkins, Graham Wilkins, Teddy Maybank, Gary Stanley, Ray Lewington, bloody hell, Stevie Wicks, I could rattle off. All those kids came into the team and tried their best to stay in the league. We got relegated, but we spent 2 years there just gelling in what was the old second division. And then, we get back in, we get promotion. We're back into, where Chelsea belong, back in the top league. And he was, I would say Dario was instrumental in preparing all of that, because he wasn't at the club when these players were coming through.
Yeah,
they'd recruited them all from like young kids through to that kind of stage of their careers. But later on, obviously, when I got into coaching myself, I look around the coaches now and I think, blimey, I haven't been in the professional game now for a while, but I look at some of the coaches now and I think, who was a great coach or you wouldn't, because you just can't get anywhere near the training ground for a start.
Yeah.
Anywhere to look over the fence and see the effect or how a manager coaches. And he was just one of those coaches who was very open, innovative, as I say. And that was a good preparation for me. And of course, he encouraged me to get into coaching straight away. Don't wait till you're 35 and try and get into coaching.
Well, it's funny you say that, Ken, because when we were there, when we just won the FA Cup, and the next thing, Dario come and we all took our FA coaching badges. Mick Kelly come down and someone else come down. And there's only 3 people that failed it, or 2. Me and Webby, I didn't want to take it.
Right.
I was 18, 19. I said, what do I want to coaching about? I'm still learning my trade. But it was laughable, at that stage. Why Dave introduced that, I don't know. But it was, probably Dario said it's good if they get their coaching badges. Well, I didn't believe that at that time. We were having too much fun anyway. Who wants a coach? You know what I mean? It's, but I mean, on record, Dario has got maybe the greatest record of bringing through international players than anyone. The Rob Jones, the right back who played, Crew.
Yeah, I remember. He said to me, Dario, at the time, he said, take Graham, Liverpool. Graham Souness was manager at the time, and he said, they've come in, because I was assisting Dario for a short spell, and he said, Liverpool are in for him. We've agreed a fee. He's going to go up there tomorrow. I'd like you to take him up. He said, because I want to, he wants to be taking the training. Of his own players. So I took Rob up to Liverpool to meet Graham, and he was like, in my car driving up, he was like petrified. He was shaking like a leaf, thinking, gone from Crewe to Liverpool. What do I ask for? And I said, you don't ask for anything. With an opportunity like this, you just take it. Just get the papers and sign it. Don't be worrying about reading it. Just get yourself up there.
Yeah. Well, that was around the time I was at Stoke. I might have been at Stoke around the time that it might have been my second time around. That Liverpool used to pay Crewe £1 million a season to get the first hit on any of their players.
Yeah, so they say. I don't know what the business.
I think it would have been true. It would have been true because that helped Crewe bring the club up, finance the club a lot, obviously there's nothing that's investing money for both clubs. That's a great investment for both clubs. That's the way football should be played, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, it's no better if you're at Crewe. No better inspiration than thinking if I do well here, I'm going to Liverpool.
Yeah.
You know,
Or
it's,
Everton.
well, I was a Shankly man, but I mean, because Alan Ball was my favourite player, I was, you know, and I'm on the Everton, the Facebook page. You know, I'm an Evertonian. I'm a blue. I'm gone from a blue nose here to a blue nose there. But that was because they had under with Alan Ball, they were, you know, he had to move on. You know, because of the players around him. I think he was that good, and I think once, because he was playing for England, and people don't really know these little things, but we do. But being around people, that it was a certainty he had to come to London to play because he loved London. You know,
yeah, he was
won the World Cup there when he was a kid, and every time they went on an England trip, he'd come back to London and had a day out with the boys and afternoon clubs, nightclubs, and so he was the be all and end all of a great pro on the field and off the field.
Yeah,
and
he was, you know, at Arsenal when he left. This was in 1970, was it? 1970, 71.
No, I replaced him at Arsenal in 77.
Yeah.
78.
Yeah. So when he went there in 1970, I went to college. I was training to teach. And I thought, God, I can't believe he's signing for Arsenal. Why would he want to leave Everton? But of course, I know now. And he loved it. He loved London. He loved the crack with the players, and whether they were like Arsenal players or Chelsea players or West Ham players. Yeah, he loved the crack, you know, in London.
Well, I think one of the reasons he left as well. I think a few Evertonians in that league-winning team, their legs were going a bit. I had a couple of that. I was at Chester Races one day and had a blinding day with Brian LeBone. Me and him were in the champagne bar together, and it was one of the best days I've ever had. And it was great to be amongst your own people. You know?
And we all know that now. I mean, I've got friends, even lads I've not played with, but you know, you've played against them a few times. You might have had a drink with them afterwards. You know, you might have been in touch with them. The camaraderie amongst players is absolutely fantastic, and you get to know more people. Like this, for instance. You know, I'm sure somebody will go, "I saw you on this podcast," and you know, I played it, whatever, and we're a brotherhood. That's what we are.
Absolutely, especially people that love the game and can play the game. And we earlier in about 18 months ago, Tony invited Dennis Mortimer on, and he was great. It was great him talking about his experience. I played against Dennis in the youth team, Chelsea against Coventry down here. I can see the bridge out my window, so I'll keep the curtains closed, Ken. So Dennis came on and told us about, you know, and the other fascinating thing about your team, and this is one of the reasons why England haven't been successful. You're the only team to ever win it with no internationals in your side. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
that's
that right. Says.
I think Peter Witt might have played one or two games
afterwards, maybe after. Maybe after. But at the time, you know, when you think, you know, and it's a tragedy what happened to young Gary Shaw. Surely he would have played for England a lot more. I speak to Gary, not regular, but he'll obviously come on the show. He's a great lad. But people must get fed up hearing about my injury and everything else. But that kid had a bad injury, you know.
He did,
right at the time when he was going to go places, you know.
Yeah, and he still blames me for it as well, because I was at Forest when he sustained his first injury, and he was through on goal 1v1. He's about 40 yards out, and I'm chasing him because I was still at a little bit of pace, and I could catch Gary Shaw in those days. And I remember like clipping his heels, so brought him down. You take a booking or a yellow card. and I think it was Ian Bowyer who was trying to help him up, and he just dragged him up, and of course his knee buckled underneath him.
Yeah.
He always blamed me for that one.
Well, so would I.
He should have, or he would have. He would have played for England. I'm absolutely sure. He was
depending on around that time, the managers weren't like the one we've got now, but they would pick their best players. But Dennis mentioned, I mean, they had so many, because I never really see them play your team, and that's what interests me a lot. And they're all good footballers. And who was that down to? Was that down to Ron Saunders? Or?
Yeah, Ron. I think he went for, you have to be competent, number one. Competent. You don't have to be a world beater, but if you were competent and reliable in the roles that you played, whether you were forwards, whether you were a midfield player creating goals, or whether you're playing at the back, making sure you don't concede goals, you had to have a level of competence, which we all had. Because I think the year before the European Cup, when we won the league, and Ipswich finished runners up to us, and it was a neck and neck race most of the season. And I thought Ipswich had some fantastic players at that time, individuals.
Yeah.
I did feel that in that Villa team, once you put that shirt on and you look in the dressing room, you think, God, best of luck trying to beat this lot. And I think our success was on the basis of we were more than competent dealing with our responsibilities, in the positions we were in. But more than anything, I think we were fitter. We ran more. We competed more. And we only used 14 players when we won the league. Yeah. And you're not telling me, because there was a few times when I definitely wasn't fit enough to play. And there were times when I could see other players were not fit enough to play. But they got out there, but they just didn't want to lose the shirt off their back. And that was my feeling. I'm not going to miss a game here. I think out of 14 players, I think it's 7 players or 8 players played every single game in the league. Yeah. So that had something to do with our physical output, our physical capabilities. So without a doubt, I think we were a better team than Ipswich. But, if you were looking at individual players and who would you like to watch every week, you'd probably want to go and watch Arnold Murin and, England players who were playing then, Terry Butcher. Bloody hell. But
they had Robson in charge, did they?
Yeah, Bob was a fantastic manager. He's one of the best we've ever had, Bobby Robson for sure. And he had, I don't know, he had a little bit of like passion and personality about his, and he was just not at the wrong club, but he took that club to levels that they would never, ever dream of. And I don't think they'd ever reach that kind of level again. And welcome back, by the way, Ipswich to the Premier League. But I don't think they'll ever achieve the kind of levels that he took them to. And he was a Geordie lad as well, Bob. And I remember being at Forest one game, and he left me out, and he left Paul Hart out of the team, and sent for us. This is like an hour and a half before kick-off. He sent somebody down. He said, Kenny, Paul, the gaffer wants to see you. So we were having a drink. He was just having he wasn't going to explain why we weren't playing. He just said, what are you having? You had a lager. You're having a lager. Yeah, a glass of wine. Okay. We were sitting there.
That's his way of telling you not to.
We were looking at each other, me and Artie, thinking, why is he left us? Why is he? And he didn't say a word at all about it. And then his secretary, Carol, lovely lady, she opens the door of his office, and we're sitting on the settee there, and in comes Bobby Robson. Well, they hugged each other like they hadn't seen each other for years, and they were talking about the Northeast and the state of football as it was then. And oh, by the way, this is Kenny and this is Paul. Oh, hi Bob, I'm pleased to meet you.
Brilliant.
He was great, Bobby Robson.
Yeah. I was a big Fulham supporter when he was there with Johnny Haynes, so I can understand his knowledge. Again. Yeah. I'm sure Tony's got a Chelsea question for you, Kenny. He died to say something.
I'm wondering what Tony's doing here.
Well, everyone wonders that, Kenny. Don't worry about that. You're not the first one.
Looks like you're enjoying it.
He fell in the trap of thinking that you and I were going to be talking about Chelsea for an hour. He fell in the trap again.
Yeah.
Well, no, the question I want to ask, we're going to go back 15, 20 minutes into something you said about Clough. Now, I can understand you saying that he changed your game as a footballer, but the significant thing for me is what you said about him changing your life. I mean, can you expand on that? Explain how that happened?
Yeah, well, I've always thought that, but I've never really gone into why it was like that. I think it was because when we went into games, when we were in different places, we're in Europe or whatever, he was. I looked at him as he was a lion heart. Do you know what I mean? You know, he'd breeze into Old Trafford, and people would be aghast. You know, wow. You know, it's Brian Clough. You know, can we get you a pot of tea? No, we've got our own tea, thank you. You know, okay. You know, and he'd just breeze in and good morning. You know, morning, madam. You know, down towards the dressing room, and he was totally fearless of the opposition. Never ever once did he talk about, like, by the way, just make sure that we don't do this, or make sure that we do this, or whatever. He never did anything like that. And in fact, it was always like, you know, thank your lucky stars you're playing at this kind of level, you know, against this side today. Yeah. He always had a downer on you, kept you down, as it were. But I think it was his fearlessness that gave me a little bit of confidence, you know, because we were always in his wake, you know, wherever he went, he led the way, and we were always in his wake behind him. And I think when I left there, I felt, wow, what an experience that was. 3 years, fantastic.
Well, he changed the game, didn't he? He changed the game in many ways, and he was fantastic for the game. If every manager had that kind of, you know, they couldn't have that character, but he kind of put people in their place.
Oh yeah,
and he was. I found out with him. I had a run-in with him. I found out with him that if you let him walk all over you, he will.
Yeah.
He didn't like. He wanted you to respond to him. He wanted you to come forward and say, you know, because when I was in Seattle, I'll tell you very quickly, Ken. When I was in Seattle, my boss Alan Hinton from the Derby, we knew it, Derby and Forest, who played at Forest in the old times. He come back to England, and to cut it real short, Clough said that he come out to Amsterdam when we played Ajax in the UEFA Cup, and I fell off the bar stool. So this is untrue, and at the airport, and this is untrue. So I think, what's he say? You know, you would. What do you think? Why say that? And then I was driving back home that day. I was in Seattle, driving along Lake Washington, looking into the water, and I'm thinking, why didn't he mention this game I played against him when he was Leeds manager? I made 2 goals and helped get him the sack. I've always played well against Derby at the baseball ground. I've had a real, quite proud of my. Anyway, I get home and I write him a letter. People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm now assistant coach in Seattle with my boss, Alan, and we go over to England. First stop, Nottingham Forest, City Ground. We've gone into the office, and he's pouring the drinks out, champagne and brandy for all his pals, you know. And before I asked touch the seat, he went, and I got your letter, young man. Right. And he didn't even raise his head, Ken.
Yeah.
Didn't raise his head. He says, and I said, there ain't no hand, mate. I just got up before I hadn't even sat down. I said, there ain't no hand. I said, and don't think he's talking out of school, because he's my mate and my manager. I said, and you? He says, stop. He said, he handed me the first glass. He says, you can have the first drink. He said, because you got bollocks. And that was it. Finished.
Well,
move on. Don't want to talk about that. Yeah. You said your piece.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't have said nothing, he'd have ripped me apart.
Yeah. He was definitely a black and white person. There was not a lot of stuff in between. And yeah, I did find him a really, really intelligent fella as well. You know, he was careful about everything he said and did.
Yeah.
And some of the times it was total instinct, and I've never seen like decisions or behaviors like that. But he had what he instilled into me was, if you've got conviction, if you've got 100% conviction or 110% conviction in what you're doing or the decision you make, you've got a better chance of succeeding than if you're a little bit flowery. You're wondering a little bit, should I not, should I say? He was bang, decision made, bang, gone.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think he made that clear to lots of players. And I've been in touch with a few players who've worked for him, didn't work out for them, left the club or whatever, but said, it was fantastic. He was honourable. He paid up what they were owed. He just didn't want them around the place because he couldn't influence them enough. And if he thought that was the case, and I've seen it happen 2 or 3 times when I was there, that was it. If you don't toe the line with everybody else, see ya. Ta-ra.
Well, it's Ken, you're describing someone who's the complete opposite of what was going on at Chelsea. We had a manager that couldn't do that, who couldn't grab hold of an individual and say, hey, what's going on? How's your life? Is it good? Is it, everything all right at home? And this is what we were lacking at Chelsea: communication between the players and the management. You had it all under this fella, and that was the downfall. That was the downfall of Chelsea. Dave went on to do better things. He was in a different environment, but the group of players he had, the group of players, the group of players at Chelsea, from the Charlie Cooks of Peter Osgood to Tommy Baldwins to Johnny Boyles, the David Webbs, they were all characters,
Oh, and that's the difference, I think, because it was pretty unique, wasn't it, when you look at it?
Something else which is really interesting about Clough as well, and I'm glad I'm talking to you about it, is we went on tour once, and we was end of season tour. There was a lot of trouble in the team. We weren't playing well. We knew it. Ozzy used to say to me, "You can do better than that." He wouldn't mess about. Even if you're out after a game, you weren't any good today. Sort your life out. This was Osgood, because he wanted the best for Chelsea, and we wanted the best. So we get on tour. We'd been out on a boat, fishing and all that. Just, it was all flowing, and we got back and we said to Ron Stewart, "We want to speak to Dave. We're on holiday. What's he doing? He can't be busy. He ain't gone to church tonight, kind of thing." He said Ron come down. He said he'll be down in half an hour. We sat there all night, Ken. Mm-hmm. He didn't want to come down and face us. He thought there was going to be... Now, Cloughy that couldn't have happened under Cloughy. It'd have straightened things out.
No.
And as I say, the fellow Waddington, who I played under, we got beat in the League Cup in Lincoln one night in 1975 when Graham Taylor was manager, strangely enough. And we went to go into our hotel, a small hotel in Lincoln, and he locked us out. We couldn't get in. A couple of players were trying to get up the drain pipe. What are you doing? Get down. We get in. Get down. The next thing you know, a voice comes out of the letterbox. You can come in. And we go in. He had all the seats around. He said, "Sit down, all of you." He'd been drinking. He was half gone as it was. He said, "Now, that ain't good enough." He said, "I'm sorting it out tonight, because if I'd gone to bed, I wouldn't have been able to sleep." He said, "That was just diabolical. Getting beat by them. Look at you, Shilton, pointing at me, Jeff Salmon, Jimmy Greenough. It's not good enough, And he sent the fella to get us all drinks. So we're sitting there 3 o'clock in the morning, still 4 o'clock, He said, "Now you can all go to bed." And we went on a run after that, for a long run without being beaten. It was great management, absolute great management. If someone would have got up and said to him, "Well, you're this and you're that, and you're pissed," he'd have said, "Well, I'll be sober tomorrow and you'll be gone." One of them.
Yeah, well, he was, he did, that infamous place, Calamalor in Mallorca, where he had a home there as well, Cloughy, and a few of the players. had a home there, but it was a regular haunt, for us during the season to go out there for 4 to 5 days, and largely we didn't train. Largely, I mean, we had the odd day or whatever, but and you'd have a drink, but he wouldn't lay down there. He'd say, right, okay, curfew tonight. What do you think is a reasonable time to come in? And he'd point at somebody, put the pressure on them, because we'd all be thinking, come on, midnight or whatever, and he'd go, he'd be looking around at the lads, one of the young lads, and he'd go, 11 o'clock. He meant 11 o'clock. How about midnight? And they'd go, yeah. He made 11 o'clock sound like it was, that's unreasonable, totally unreasonable. But he wanted to know what you thought was reasonable. Wow. And this, I think it was Peter Davenport or something like that. And he said, I think 11 o'clock is that okay? He said, how about midnight? And we're all delighted.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we made the rules, not him.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, he let you. That's the way he liked it. Yeah, you're happy with that. You got no excuses. Yeah.
Talking of managers, Ken. You mentioned Eddie Mack earlier, and Alan has got a great relationship with Eddie Mack still to this day. Can I ask you about the impact he had in your formative years at Chelsea, and the impact he had on all those youngsters that came through the ranks and got promotion in such a spectacular way in '76?
Yeah, I think Eddie probably didn't. Well, he didn't. I don't think he influenced me a great deal. But what he was good at was player relations. He was good with the player, and particularly because he inherited this bunch of young players. I think they were all eating out of his hands, as it were. I never felt, I never felt I was in his camp, if you know what I mean. But nevertheless, he was great in the dressing room. I think he might have been. I'm just trying to think who was taking training at the time. He wasn't a great tactician. There was nothing fantastic about that. I think he was like, he knew he had some bloody good, young players to come through here. I think Davy Hay came, and he kept one or two of the stalwarts at the club. Ronnie, Buller, Ronnie Harris, Lou, Marvin Hinton. He had a couple of other decent pros. Webby had gone by then. I know Alan had gone. Ozzy had gone. But he was managing I think it was a balancing act there of, he's got so many talented young players, but needs a little bit of experience, but maybe hadn't got enough experience, because the legs were going a little bit. So I never felt personally that he did anything for me as such, other than obviously pick you and put you in the team. But I think, his balancing act and his qualities were really in the dressing room and in relationships with the younger players. And they all he was a popular manager. I know that, a popular figure in the dressing room.
On managers, Tony Barton, what did he? I mean,
Tony was Tony been down to see me 2 or 3 times in '78. And I wasn't in the Chelsea team at the time. I was playing a few reserve games. And he'd come down to watch me a couple of times. I found out later. And it was Frank Upton. Do you remember Frank? Frank Upton. Frank Upton was an assistant to Ken. And I couldn't hold down a place in Ken's team. And Frank Upton rang me and he said, Ken's told me to ring you. Ron Saunders has been in touch. We've agreed a fee, and here's his number. Ron Saunders, give him a call, because I think he wants to have a chat with you. Take your wife up there if you want, So that I went up there, went up to Villa, spoke to Ron, sorted it all out. And I was shocked because I thought a transfer meant, you're going to get a few quid. but it wasn't. But it was all there if you were successful, if you got in the team. You know, it was an incentive. It wasn't guaranteed. And I remember coming back thinking, "Wow, bloody hell, what a fantastic opportunity!" And the opportunity only came because Andy Gray was injured, and I just thought he was a great striker at the time. And Brian Little, you know, those two together, there was some force for Villa. But my opportunity was because Andy was out injured, Brian Little was out injured, and I thought, well, it's a chance. And my wife always said to me when we got back, "You might never get a chance like this again. You know, I know you think you might have got more money or whatever, but what an opportunity this is. You know."
Yeah. Have you any? Did you ever want the England job, management? No, has it ever been a dream of yours or anything?
Oh no, I think you can have dreams. I suppose playing football was the biggest dream come true. No matter what your career gave you. I mean, there's a lad who's doing some. He works for BT and he's doing some work here now, and he's played non-league football, and he was a goalkeeper. And he was telling me just before we came on air, and he said, "God, if I could have just played one game, you know, in the league." And I've known loads of kids who, you know, I've given their England debuts to, and I've lost you.
No, we can still hear you.
Go on, carry on, Ken.
Carry on, Ken.
Yeah, I've got loads of kids who've I've given debuts to for England, you know, when they're 15, 16. And I think I've lost you there, haven't I?
No, we haven't lost you at all.
Okay. Yeah, and quite a few of them have. You can see, you know, their tongues are hanging out, and they're thinking, "Oh God, I just want to play one game," you know, for Blackburn Rovers or wherever this kid's come from. And I know how much that means to kids. And even this young fella who's working here today, he's a little bit older than that now, of course, but he was saying, "I would have loved just to get one game under my belt to say I've been a league player." So, you know, that kind of dream is in us all. But, you know, when you're talking about management, I think that is a different thing.